Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I feel like I'm to the point in my reading journey where I've been reading for a while. I have read quite a few books and I've had people come to me in my personal life say that they want to get into reading or they want to start reading or read different genres. When you're first starting out with reading, it can be very daunting because there's just so many books to choose from. You don't even know where to start. It can be kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Intimidating. It can be kind of intimidating. I'm gonna give you some book recommendations from fantasy, romance, mystery thriller, literary fiction, good books to get into reading, but also if you're already a reader but just want some quick, fun, easier reads, do whatever you want with this information. I'm just gonna give you some good book recommendations. In no way am I saying that these books are like some literary masterpiece, because that's not what we're looking for here. We're trying to get into reading. We don't need a literary masterpiece. We just need a quick, fun, easy book. So I'm gonna start with mystery/thriller. I don't read too much from this genre. I do like it. I don't really have anything against it. It's just not my favorite, which, you know, that's okay. But I do have some books that I do really like from this genre, and I definitely want to start reading more. I have not read a thriller in I don't even know how long. The first one I'm gonna recommend is Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. This is one of the first books that I read when I first started getting into reading, and I loved it. This book was so good. Alice Feeney in general is just a really good mystery thriller author. Rock, Paper, Scissors is about a couple. They win a weekend away to this like remote cabin, and when they're on this trip, weird things start happening. Things aren't adding up. The chapters are also really short, which I feel like makes you want to keep reading, because that's something that I really liked about this book, was that each chapter kind of ended in a cliffhanger, so I literally just wanted to keep going. Like, I just wanted to keep reading. Yeah, this is definitely a good one to start with. Another book by Alice Feeney that I really like is His and Hers. This is another thriller, but this one I loved. I love this one more than Rock, Paper, Scissors. I think about this book a lot. I actually think they're turning it into a movie, but I'm pretty sure I heard that somewhere. So, oh, it's on the back. Duh. Probably write it on the back of the book. Soon to be a major TV series. Okay, so it's gonna be a TV series. This one is about a news reporter and a detective, and a woman is killed in this small town, and the news reporter of the town is documenting on the case or whatever. The detective in the case is a little suspicious of her. He thinks the news reporter girl is involved in this murder somehow, and then all of a sudden the detective himself becomes a part of the investigation, like a main suspect in the murder. Very interesting. I literally read this in one day, and I read it so long ago and I still think about it to this day. I love this book. Highly recommend this one. I need to read more of Alice Feeney's books, honestly, because these are the only two I've read and I absolutely loved both of them. This one you've probably heard me talk about if you watch my channel, because I love this series. I read it last summer and it was so good. The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This one is more of a mystery than a thriller. I feel like there's thriller aspects to it, but it's definitely more mystery, and there's 4 books in the series, plus like a 5th little novella at the end too. Definitely love a good series, but it's about 5 teenagers who get recruited by the FBI to solve cold cases for them. These teens have like special talents, I guess you could call it. So our main character, Cassie, she can read people really well. Like, just by meeting somebody, she can like read their entire personality. All the other characters just have their own little like quirks and things that make them special. So interesting and so intriguing, the whole entire series, but also the found family aspect between the 5 characters in the book is just so cute. You get a little love triangle romance in there. That's one of my favorite things in books, is the found family aspect. You'll definitely notice that as a common theme in a lot of the books that I recommend, because one of my favorite tropes for sure. I literally read this series in like a month. So cute, and it's so good. And then our last thriller book that I'm gonna recommend is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. This one I heard a lot about before I read it, and it's really good. Like, this one's definitely darker than the other ones. This one's about a girl named Alicia, and she is just this normal lady, never anything raising red flags about her, and then one day her husband comes home from work and she shoots him, and then she goes to a mental asylum and never speaks another word ever again. So nobody ever figures out what happened. And then this, what is he? Criminal psychotherapist Theo is like really interested in her case, and so he's convinced that he can make her talk. He decides that he's gonna go talk to her and try to get a story out of her. And yeah, this book was crazy. I didn't know what to expect going into it, and if you're looking for a really good thriller, this is one. This is definitely one. Now I'm gonna do like literary fiction because I only have 2. I don't read literary fiction too much, but I definitely want to get more into it. My book taste is changing a little bit, and I want to read more literary fiction for sure. But my 2 recommendations for you, we'll start with Mary Jane. I read this last summer when I went to Hawaii, and I loved it. It's about a 14-year-old girl named Mary Jane. This book is set in the 1970s, by the way. So she's a 14-year-old girl growing up in the 70s, and the family that she lives in is just a very like conservative, I don't know if that's the word I would use. She's just like a very good kid, always listening to her parents. So she gets hired as a babysitter over the summer for this little girl, and when she goes over to the family's house, their dynamic is just so much different than her family's dynamic. Dad of the little girl is a doctor, and he's actually helping these 2 rock stars get sober. Like, he's letting them live there and everything. Mary Jane is like spending a lot of time with them and their family, and like it's just an entirely different dynamic than what she's used to. So she's introduced to a lot of new things. Once again, found family aspect in this book. Didn't really know what I was going into. That's my thing with books. I don't really like to read the back. I kind of just like to go into them and have no idea what's going on. But this one was just so cute. Like, it was so wholesome. I loved the ending. I love how everything wrapped up, how it turned out. And if you're going on vacation or anything soon, like to a beach or something, bring this with you, because I read this when I was on vacation and I really liked it. And then the other one that I'll recommend is Daisy Jones and the Six. I recommend this book a lot, but I really like it, and I feel like it's definitely good for getting into reading because the way that it's written is like interview style. Here, I'll show you one of the pages so you can know what I'm talking about. See how every sentence is like their name is at the beginning? So it's written a little bit differently than like your average book. It's written in interview style. You kind of just get to see like all the characters talking about these different points in their life. It's about a band in the 60s, fictional band in the 60s, and literally just their rise to fame and fall from fame, I guess. You kind of just see like each character and what they go through and how the band comes to be. This is also a TV show that came out last year around this time of year, and it's literally phenomenal. Like, I love it. Definitely think you should read the book first, just because there's parts of the book that they left out of the TV show. It's still really good. One of my favorite book to TV adaptations. Easy read and has a good TV show to watch after, so then you have something to watch after you're done reading. It's a win-win. Okay, we have fantasy and romance left, and I'm gonna do fantasy because I have a lot of romance recommendations, but not as much fantasy because I feel like fantasy is a very hard genre to recommend to new readers. It can be complicated, so I feel like fantasy almost can be its own entire video, like how to get into reading fantasy. So if you want to see that, definitely let me know, because I definitely have some recommendations for getting into reading fantasy. For new readers, I do have a couple recommendations for fantasies that are pretty easy to understand, not too high fantasy, more easy, like world building, doesn't give you too much of a headache. Fantasy can do that, it really can. We're gonna start with the obvious, Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I have to recommend this because that's what the book was kind of made for. Rebecca Yarros herself even says that she wrote this book for romance readers to get into fantasy. That itself kind of tells you that it's easier to understand. There's not as much world building. I feel like the world building is like intertwined intertwined with like the story, so you're not really spending pages reading about the world and how it works and all of the laws and rules of the land. Like, it's kind of just intertwined in the story. Absolutely loved this book. So many mixed opinions on it, but I feel like to get into reading, especially fantasy, this is a good one, whether you like to hear it or not. Don't take that advice when you read Iron Flame. But then we have The Cruel Prince, which this one is actually a newer one that I finished. I read this at the end of 2023. It's about a girl named Jude, and she is a human living in a fairy world. To be clear, when we're talking about fairies, we're not talking about like Tinkerbell. We're talking about like these humans with ears. They don't have, we're not, you know, we're not talking about like a cute little fairy. No, they're not cute. They're actually kind of terrifying. But anyway, she gets taken away from the human world to go live in the fairy world, and that's kind of where she grows up. She just has to kind of learn how to live there as a human because they all hate her. This is definitely fantasy. There's not any romance in this book. I feel like I need to make that clear because that's a common misconception that I see, is that people think there's romance in this book, because I thought the same thing. There's not. There's a little bit in the next one. I haven't finished the third one. I'm actually reading it right now, but not really any in this book. Just straight fantasy, but it's still really good. And you can also listen to it on Spotify. I did a lot of listening with this series. I've listened to a lot of it, so you could do that too, because I really do like listening to books. Then I have Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. This one I read quite a while ago, I think at the end of 2022. This is about a girl named Alina who is a soldier, and fantasies are so hard to explain, but in the world that they live in, there's this thing called the Shadow Fold. If you go through it, you're most likely to die. She has to go through it, and when she does, she unleashes this magical power that she has, that she doesn't know that she has. A lot of people are out to get her. She's got a lot of stuff to figure out after that happens. This one is a series. There's 3 books, and then there's also like a spin-off series. The spin-off so much better than this series, but I feel like it's a lot higher fantasy. When you're wanting to get into fantasy, this one's a great one to start with. This is also a show on Netflix, and the show is so good. Once again, you definitely should read the book first. But my last fantasy recommendation is Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. I also talk about this series a lot because this is another one that's just like such a good recommendation for new readers. Stephanie Garber's writing is very straight to the point. There's no fancy aspect to it. She just kind of tells you how it is straight up. Like, the story is just, she's just telling you how the story's going, and I feel like that's why it feels like a fairy tale almost. It's also very fast-paced. It's about a girl named Evangeline, and the love of her life is gonna get married to somebody else, so she wants to stop the wedding, and she decides to strike a deal with the Prince of Hearts. We love the Prince of Hearts, aka Jax. There's just so much romance in this story. There's so much fairy tale. I just love it so much. I would love if they made this book into a movie. Okay, on to our last category, which is romance. I have quite a few romance recommendations here. I feel like romance is the easiest genre to read when getting into reading. I started out with romance. Most of the books that I've read are romance. If you watch my channel, you've probably heard me talk about most of these books before. We'll start with 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. This is a romance about 2 writers, and they dated when they were teenagers and then go on their own ways. But when they're adults, they meet at a literary event. It kind of just goes from there. You kind of just see them come back into each other's lives. They have a lot of unanswered questions from the past that they need to figure out. And I just really loved this. I'm pretty sure they just announced that it's being made into a movie or TV show, one of the two. I'm so excited to watch it. Then we have Twisted Love by Anna Huang. This is one of the first books that I read when I got into reading. I feel like this little romance series is a perfect one to read when getting into reading. This book is about Alex and Ava, and Alex is Ava's brother's best friend and also her next door neighbor. You kind of just see them, their little romance. Ava has 3 friends that you're introduced to in this book, and then the next 3 books are about her friends, and I love the whole series. I feel like if you want to read the whole series, you definitely should read this one first. There's definitely a little bit of spice in it, so be aware of that. I feel like I really liked it when I got into reading, so it's a perfect recommendation. If He Had Been With Me by Laura Nolan. This is a YA romance about 2 high schoolers, Autumn and Finn. They were like childhood best friends, friends, but when they got to high school they kind of like grew apart. But this book is so sad. Like there's something that happens in the book that you see happen right at the beginning, so you kind of know that it happens, but it's still sad no matter what once you get to the end of the book. It felt more childish in a way because it's written about high schoolers, but it kind of just reminded me of like my high school experience and being in high school and what it felt like to be 15 and 16 and like a boy, and for the drama at school to literally be the most important thing in your life. Like all of that, it's just kind of encapsulated in this book. It is very sad, but I did just like the almost nostalgic feel of it. Heartstopper by Alice Alsman. This is actually a graphic novel about Nick and Charlie, and they are two guys who become friends in school, and eventually you see them kind of fall in love and like figure that out, because obviously being gay in high school isn't always the easiest thing. There's 5 books in the series. It is a graphic novel, and I feel like I should recommend it because graphic novels are perfect to get into reading. It's not as daunting as a full novel book, like 300-400 page, but you're still reading. It's still good, and it's super cute. I love the whole series. Their little friend group is so cute. There's a lot of little messages that, you know, you can kind of take from. I just really like it. I feel like it's a really cute, wholesome series. When in Rome by Sarah Adams. I read this, I don't remember what, I think like May of last year, and this really took me by surprise because I wasn't expecting to like it as much as I did. It's a cute little romance about Amelia, who's a pop star, and Noah, who is just pie maker. He's like a baker. Yeah, he owns like this little bakery in a small town of Rome, Kentucky. And Amelia crashes into his front yard. Her car breaks down in his front yard. And so she kind of just stays with him for a little bit, and you kind of just see the romance form between them. It's just a cute little fluffy romance. I just really liked their characters. Their characters felt very mature. Happy Place by Emily Henry. Y'all will see that I actually have a copy of this now because this one is actually signed by Emily Henry herself. But this is the newest release from Emily Henry, by far my favorite book of hers. All of Emily Henry's books could be perfect for getting into reading. I feel like any of her books are literally perfect for that, but this one, you could consider this romance or literary fiction. It kind of depends how you look at it. It's kind of just about this friend group who has been friends for a really long time. Harriet and Wynne are a couple. They've been together for a really long time, and they actually ended up breaking up, but they had this trip planned with their friend group, and they haven't told their friend group that they broke up. So they decide that they're just gonna pretend that they're together on this trip to not ruin it for everybody else. Obviously that doesn't go very well. You kind of just see them like navigate their friend group. This book is a perfect representation of growing up and what it feels like to grow up with your friend group and become an adult, and like things change. I loved it so much, and I like the romance, but I feel like a bigger part of this book was Harriet's growth in herself as a character. That's what I loved most about it. It's just so good, and I feel like especially if you're a young adult, like in your late teens, early 20s, even your late 20s, this is a great book to read. Addicted to You by Krista Becker Ritchie. This is a book that I also read when I first got into reading. It's a huge series, like 10 books, which sounds very intimidating. This one is about Lily and Lo, and Lily is addicted to sex and Lo is addicted to alcohol, and they're best friends. They live together. They're definitely in love with each other. They both kind of enable each other with their addictions, and you kind of see them struggling with that and trying to get out of it. I loved this book. I feel like if I read it again, it would feel so nostalgic, because when you continue the series, you see the growth with the characters. When I think about the characters in this book compared to where I am at now in the series, I'm on like the 8th book. There's just so much that happens, and it's the found family. The series is just so incredible, and if you're looking to get into a romance series that's just kind of more character driven than plot driven, for sure, you're definitely more focusing on the characters and their struggles, this is a series for you. I love this series with my whole heart, and once again, that found family aspect, you definitely should read it. Highly recommend. Then we have Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter. I talk about this book all the time. I feel like this is one of the best books to read if you're wanting to get into romance. It's a YA romance about two high schoolers, Liz and Wes, and they're kind of like enemies, which I don't really like to say in romance books because I feel like enemies is a stretch. Like, do you really have an enemy? They're neighbors and they go to high school together. Liz has a crush on this boy at school, so she asks Wes to help her get his attention, and you kind of just see the romance between Liz and Wes build while they're doing that. Once again, kind of reminds me of like being in high school and being a teenager, and it's just so cute, light and fluffy, and just easy fun read. And then the last book that I'm going to recommend to you for this video is The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. This I actually read not too long ago. It's about a girl named Clementine, and she moves into her late aunt's apartment, and this apartment is a little bit magical because when she walks into the apartment, there is a man in her apartment, except he's not actually there because he was in the apartment 7 years ago. Honestly, kind of confusing at first. When I read it, I was like, I'm so confused how this works. Like, but once you get into the book, you'll understand what's happening, what's going on, and the romance is so cute. I tabbed this book, which I haven't been big into tabbing lately. I used to literally tab and highlight and underline all of my books. I just haven't been doing that lately, but I literally had to for this one. There were such cute quotes, and it kind of gives me the same energy as Happy Place, dealing with growing up and changing and coming out of your shell, but you also kind of see the main character Clementine dealing with grief. There's just so much mixed into this book, and it's genuinely so good. I highly recommend it. But those are all of the books that I have to recommend to you today. I hope you've got some inspiration, some recommendations to get into reading. Just remember, don't be scared to get into reading. Reading is so much fun. It doesn't matter what you're reading, what genre, what book. It doesn't have to be the most incredible book ever written. It can literally be a silly Kindle Unlimited read. It doesn't matter. Reading is reading, and you can read whatever you want. Do whatever you want to do. I hope I helped you out a little bit. If you want to see more videos from me, definitely subscribe so you can stick around, and I will see you in my next one. Peace.